They dragged a young Apache woman through the desert until a cowboy said, "Stop." In a small Apache village nestled between rocky hills, life was beginning like any other day. Birds chirped softly, and the sound of distant wind moved through the canyons. The village was peaceful, a place where families worked together, cared for one another, and lived close to the land that had sustained them for generations. Among the villagers was a young woman named Ahioka, which meant she brings happiness. She was 18 years old, with long black hair that gleamed in the sunlight and eyes that reflected the strength and intelligence of her people. She was known for her kindness and for her skill in helping her family with daily tasks. Every morning, she would help her mother prepare food, fetch water from the nearby stream, and tend to the small garden where herbs and vegetables grew. Life was simple but full of purpose. That morning, Ahioka woke before dawn. She liked the quiet of early hours when the world seemed still and every sound felt sharp and clear. She carried a small bundle of herbs to her mother, smiling as she passed children playing with sticks and stones outside their homes. She noticed the elders sitting in the shade, speaking softly in their language about the coming day. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, and safe. But safety in the desert was fragile, and life could change in an instant. A distant sound reached Ahioka's ears, a sharp, unsettling clatter that didn't belong to the usual morning bustle. Her heart skipped a beat and she paused, listening carefully. At first, she thought it might be a herd of deer or a stray horse, but the sound was different. It was the sound of hooves pounding hard against dry earth, mixed with shouting voices. Fear prickled at her chest. Ahioka ran toward her family's home, her mind racing. By the time she reached the center of the village, chaos had erupted. A band of raiders had appeared over the ridge, moving swiftly and with brutal intent. Their horses kicked up clouds of dust, and their voices shouted orders as they charged into the village. The elders shouted warnings, and the villagers scrambled to hide or escape. Children cried, and mothers grabbed their young ones tightly, running toward the rocks and hills for safety. Ahioka's heart pounded as she tried to make sense of what was happening. She saw her mother holding her little brother, running toward a narrow canyon path that might lead them out of danger. Her father tried to rally some of the older men to defend their homes, but there were too few of them, and the raiders were too many. The village, normally so alive with laughter and song, had turned into a place of fear and confusion. One of the raiders spotted Ahioka. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her. She struggled, kicking and pulling, but the raiders were too strong. They laughed and shouted as they dragged her away from her home, away from her family. She could see the dust rising over the village, the figures of her mother and brother running for their lives, the terrified faces of her friends disappearing behind rocks. Ahioka felt a sharp ache in her chest, not from the struggle, but from the sudden, wrenching separation from everyone she loved. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, its harsh beauty both breathtaking and cruel. The raiders dragged her across the sand, the sun beating down relentlessly. Her feet were bare, and the hot sand burned against her skin. Her body ached from being pulled along roughly, but her spirit refused to give up. Ahioka had been taught by her elders that even in the most hopeless situations, one must hold onto courage. She reminded herself of that lesson now, gripping her resolve like a shield against the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She stumbled, her knees scraping against sharp stones, but the raiders did not slow. Their voices were loud and cruel, mocking her and warning her to stop struggling. Ahioka realized that if she gave them fear or despair, they would take more joy in hurting her. So she focused on breathing, on steadying her mind, on keeping her thoughts away from panic. She counted her steps, imagining the desert as a vast, endless stretch of ground she could survive if she stayed strong. As they moved further into the desert, the sun climbed higher in the sky. The heat was almost unbearable. Ahioka's lips cracked and her tongue felt thick and dry. She longed for water, for even a small sip to ease the burning in her throat. But the raiders seemed oblivious to her suffering, their focus only on their own mission. She felt anger rise inside her, mingled with fear. They could not take away her courage, she told herself, no matter how much they dragged her across the desert. Memories of her family gave her strength. She thought of her mother's gentle hands, of her father's steady voice, of the songs her grandmother would sing at night. Each memory became a small flame inside her, keeping her spirit alive. The desert, with its harsh wind and endless sands, was vast, but Ahioka reminded herself that she was stronger than it seemed. She would survive this. She had to. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. It was hard to tell in the heat and confusion. The raiders seemed intent on taking her somewhere far from the village, somewhere they could hide without interference. But the desert had its own secrets. Rocks created shadows that moved with the sun, small creeks ran hidden under sand, and hills rose suddenly where one could rest briefly before continuing the long march. Ahioka looked for every opportunity to ease her suffering, to rest her aching body for even a moment, to keep her mind sharp. Despite her fear, she observed the raiders carefully. She noticed the way they spoke to each other, the brief moments when they were distracted or careless. She took note of landmarks in the desert, the way a particular rock jutted out of the sand, the curve of a small canyon that might help her if she escaped. Even as they dragged her along, she was learning, planning, surviving. The sun was relentless, and exhaustion began to weigh heavily on her body. Her muscles ached, and her vision blurred slightly from heat and fatigue. But just as despair threatened to take root, something caught her eye on the horizon, a tiny moving figure, a silhouette against the bright sky. It was far away, but its presence stirred hope in her heart. Perhaps help was near. Perhaps she was not entirely alone. Ahioka did not dare speak, did not dare show hope. She focused instead on staying strong, on keeping her mind sharp, and on imagining herself reunited with her family. The desert had already tested her, but she knew she had survived worse. If only in small ways, in small lessons her elders had taught her about endurance, about courage, and about hope. As the day continued, the raiders finally slowed, perhaps resting or deciding on their next move. Ahioka took the chance to breathe more deeply, to gather strength for the journey ahead. The desert was vast, and it would challenge her, but she was determined not to let fear rule her. Even in chains, even dragged across the scorching sands, she remained unyielding, steadfast, and full of quiet courage. And somewhere beyond the waves of heat and sand, a figure approached, a lone cowboy, unaware of the young woman's plight, but about to become a crucial part of her story. The desert stretched endlessly, and the struggle had only just begun, but Ahioka's heart, full of hope and determination, refused to break. The desert sun beat down relentlessly, turning the sand into a mirror of heat that shimmered and twisted with every step. Ahioka's body ached, her arms and legs scraped and sore from being dragged across the unforgiving terrain. Her hands, though small, were raw and blistered from gripping the rough rope that held her captive. Yet, even in pain, her spirit remained unbroken. She refused to give the raiders the satisfaction of seeing her despair. As the raiders pressed onward, the world around Ahioka seemed to stretch endlessly. The hills rolled into distant shadows, and the barren desert spread in all directions, dotted with sparse shrubs and rocky outcrops. Each step felt heavier than the last, and her throat burned with thirst. She longed for a stream or a hidden spring, but the desert offered nothing. Despite the heat and fatigue, Ahioka's mind remained alert. She remembered every lesson her elders had taught her about surviving in the harsh desert. The importance of observing the land, noting the position of the sun, and saving energy for critical moments. The raiders spoke among themselves, their voices harsh and filled with laughter. They were focused on their own agenda, seemingly indifferent to Ahioka's suffering. They underestimated her. They did not realize that beneath her calm exterior, a storm of determination brewed. Each insult, each shove, only fueled her resolve to survive. She measured her movements carefully, conserving strength while resisting the urge to collapse from exhaustion. Her feet dragged painfully along the hot sand, small cuts forming with every stumble. Her bare skin sizzled under the midday sun, and she could feel the sweat soaking through her clothes, mixing with the dust and grime. Yet Ahioka refused to cry out. She remembered her mother's words. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to keep going when fear is all around you. Clinging to these words, she held her head high, even as her body screamed for rest. Hours passed, marked only by the shifting position of the sun. Ahioka's thoughts drifted to her family. She imagined her mother, tending to her garden with gentle hands, her father checking the traps set for small game, and her younger brother playing nearby, oblivious to the dangers of the world. The memory of their faces brought a bittersweet ache to her chest. She longed to run to them to feel their embrace, but the raiders kept moving relentlessly. Each memory, however, became a small spark of strength, pushing her forward when her body begged her to stop. The desert was not just empty sand, it was alive with its own quiet challenges. The wind shifted suddenly, stirring the dust and sand into sharp gusts that cut against Ahioka's skin. Rocks jutted out unexpectedly, threatening to trip her weary legs. At times, the raiders forced her over uneven terrain, the rope cutting into her wrists and shoulders. Every step was agony, yet she endured. She had learned from the elders that pain could be a teacher. Every bruise, every scrape was a reminder of her strength, of her ability to survive. As the afternoon wore on, Ahioka began to notice patterns in the raiders' movements. They were growing careless, laughing too loudly, and allowing their focus to drift. She took careful note of every detail: the shape of the hills, the direction of the wind, the spots where she might hide or escape if a chance came. Even in captivity, her mind remained sharp. She reminded herself that survival was not just about enduring the body's pain. It was about observing, thinking, and planning. Her thoughts also drifted to the stories her grandmother had told her at night, stories of brave women and warriors who faced impossible odds. Those stories had always seemed distant, almost like myths, but now they felt alive within her. Ahioka felt herself drawing strength from them, imagining herself as one of those heroes. She could hear the voice of her grandmother echoing in her mind. A heart that refuses to surrender can conquer even the harshest desert. Despite the oppressive heat, she kept moving, step by step, never letting despair take root. The raiders were relentless, but Ahioka's spirit was stronger than they could see. She endured hunger, thirst, and exhaustion, all while maintaining a careful awareness of her surroundings. She noted the sun's movement, the shadows cast by distant rocks, and the subtle shifts in the sand beneath her feet. These small observations became her guideposts, reminders that the desert, though harsh, held the keys to survival if one knew how to pay attention. As the day wore on, Ahioka's body began to falter. Her knees buckled occasionally and her breaths came in ragged gasps, but she refused to give up. She remembered the small lessons her mother had taught her. Even when the path seems impossible, take one step at a time. One step is all it takes to survive another moment. She clung to that idea, repeating it to herself like a mantra. One step at a time, one step at a time. The raiders, oblivious to her growing awareness, continued their journey. They had not noticed her small, careful glances at the horizon, her quiet assessments of where they were going and how far they had traveled. Ahioka realized that if she were patient, if she observed and waited for the right moment, an opportunity might present itself. The desert, after all, was vast, and even those who seemed all-powerful could make mistakes. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the dunes, the heat started to ease slightly, but a new challenge emerged: fatigue and the approaching cold. The desert could be merciless both day and night. Ahioka shivered slightly, her sweat cooling on her skin as she fought to maintain warmth and focus. She pressed on, leaning on her memory of safe places, hidden creeks, and familiar landscapes from her childhood. Every memory became a tool, a strategy, a small beacon of hope in the endless desert. Her mind wandered to the moments she had spent learning the ways of the land. Her father had taught her to recognize signs of water, to identify edible plants, and to read the tracks of animals. Those lessons, once simple teachings of daily life, now became vital knowledge. Ahioka scanned the terrain for anything that could sustain her if she were forced to escape or survive alone. Even in captivity, she never stopped learning, never stopped observing, never stopped planning. By the time the sun began its descent, the desert's landscape had shifted into shades of orange and red. Ahioka's skin was sunburned and her lips cracked with thirst, but her mind remained clear. She noticed a distant ridge, a small rise that could provide a brief respite or even a chance to hide if the raiders allowed her a moment. She clutched at these small possibilities, turning them over in her mind like precious stones. Each idea was a step closer to survival, a spark of hope in a harsh world. As night approached, the raiders finally slowed their pace. The desert was quieter now, the wind moving softly across the sand. Ahioka's muscles ached with exhaustion, but she took a moment to rest slightly, careful not to draw attention. She found a small depression between rocks, just enough to shield herself from the sharp edges of the desert floor. Lying there, she thought of her family, of the warmth of her home, and of the possibility that someone might come to help her. She did not know how far she had traveled or how long she had been dragged across the desert. Time felt strange, stretched and distorted by pain and fear. Yet Ahioka refused to succumb to hopelessness. She knew that survival depended not just on enduring the body's suffering, but on keeping the heart alive, on maintaining hope, courage, and awareness. The desert was harsh. The raiders were cruel, but she had her mind, her spirit, and the lessons of her people. Those were weapons stronger than any rope, stronger than any threat. And as she lay among the rocks, waiting for the next step in this long, grueling journey, a small spark of hope lit within her. Somewhere beyond the endless sands and rolling hills, there might be someone who could intervene, someone who could see the injustice and act. For now, she rested her body, conserving what little strength remained. She knew the desert was not just a place of suffering, it was also a place where courage could shine brightest. Even as the night crept in, bringing with it the chill and darkness, Ahioka held onto her resolve. She had survived every challenge so far, and she would continue to survive. The desert had tested her body, but her spirit remained unbroken. Each step she had taken, each moment she had endured, had prepared her for whatever lay ahead. The young Apache woman, though weary, was ready. Ready to continue, ready to endure, and ready to seize any opportunity that the vast, harsh desert might present. Her story of courage, resilience, and determination was only beginning, and the winds of the desert whispered of challenges yet to come, and of the unexpected arrival of someone who might change everything. The desert stretched endlessly, painted in shades of gold and orange as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The air was still and heavy, carrying the faint scent of sage and dry earth. Ahioka's body was exhausted, her muscles aching from the relentless hours of being dragged across the sand. Every step left painful impressions on her blistered feet, and her arms ached from struggling against the ropes that bound her. Yet, even in her exhaustion, her mind remained alert, sharp, and aware. She had learned to notice the smallest details, the way shadows shifted across the dunes, the subtle changes in wind direction, the faint tracks left by animals or travelers. These lessons were now vital. The desert was not just a place of suffering. It was a place of survival, a place where keen eyes and a steady mind could make the difference between life and death. Ahioka kept herself focused, measuring her movements and looking for opportunities to escape, even as the raiders continued their cruel march. The raiders, laughing and shouting among themselves, seemed unaware of the woman's quiet observation. They were focused entirely on their own goals, talking about the distance to the next settlement, the spoils they hoped to claim, and the thrill of having captured someone so young and helpless. Their arrogance gave Ahioka a small, quiet hope. She knew that those who underestimated their prey often made mistakes, and mistakes could become opportunities. Hours passed, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting long, wavering shadows across the sand. Ahioka's body was drenched in sweat and every muscle screamed for relief, yet she pressed on. She clung to the lessons her family had taught her. In the desert, even the smallest observation can save a life. Do not stop noticing. Do not stop thinking. One step forward is always better than despair. Each word repeated in her mind like a lifeline, anchoring her in the present and giving her the strength to endure. As she stumbled over a small rise, Ahioka caught a glimpse of something unusual in the distance, a figure moving steadily across the desert. At first she thought it might be another raider, perhaps coming to join their group, but as the figure grew closer, she realized it was different. It was a lone man on horseback, riding with calm determination, his posture upright and confident. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face, a long coat that moved lightly in the wind, and boots that clicked rhythmically against the horse's sides. Ahioka's heart beat faster. Could this man be an enemy or a friend? She could not know yet. But something about the way he rode suggested confidence and purpose. He did not shout or gallop recklessly. He moved with deliberate control, scanning the desert as if he were familiar with every dune, every rock, every shadow. For a brief moment, hope flickered in her heart. Perhaps help was coming. Perhaps she was not entirely alone. The raiders, oblivious to the approaching figure, continued their journey. They laughed and jeered at her, mocking her weakness and exhaustion. One of them pushed her roughly and she stumbled against a rock, scraping her arm. The pain was sharp, but it did not break her. She rose quickly, her mind focusing on the distant rider. She studied the man's approach, trying to discern whether he might intervene or if she needed to remain cautious. As the lone cowboy drew closer, he began to slow his horse, keeping a careful distance. He had noticed the group ahead, moving as if they were dragging something or someone across the sand. His sharp eyes caught the outline of a young woman struggling, her movements constrained by ropes. Something inside him tightened. He had seen injustice before and he could not ignore it. He nudged his horse forward, his gaze fixed on the group. Ahioka's heart leapt at the sight of him. She could not speak, could not call out, but something in the way the man rode, steady and purposeful, gave her courage. He seemed to understand without words that she was in need of help. Her hope grew, mingled with caution. She knew the raiders could turn violent at any moment. She kept her eyes on the man, silently willing him to act. The cowboy did not approach recklessly. He rode slowly, keeping the sun at his back, observing the raiders and assessing their behavior. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm but firm. "Stop," he called out, projecting authority without anger. The raiders turned, startled by the unexpected command. They laughed, thinking he could not possibly interfere, and shouted back at him. But the cowboy did not back down. He raised one hand, keeping it steady, and repeated, "I said stop. Let her go." A tense silence followed. The desert wind stirred softly, and the raiders exchanged glances. The cowboy's presence was commanding, and something in his tone suggested that he would not be ignored. The young woman, though still bound and weak, felt a rush of relief. Someone had seen her, someone had recognized her suffering, and someone was willing to intervene. The raiders hesitated, their confidence wavering. They had never encountered someone so calm in the face of their aggression. The cowboy dismounted slowly, keeping his movements measured, and stepped toward the group. Every eye was on him now, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. Ahioka could barely move, but she felt the tension in the air, the shift that suggested that change, sudden and unexpected, was near. One of the raiders tried to step forward, but the cowboy's presence, firm and unwavering, stopped him. "I'm not asking," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Let her go, or you will face consequences." The raiders laughed nervously, unsure whether this lone man could enforce his words, yet they felt an instinctive hesitation. The desert had its own rules, and even those who seemed powerful were cautious when confronted with unexpected courage. Ahioka watched silently, her heart pounding in her chest. This stranger might be her only chance, and she could sense his determination. He was not a man who sought conflict for its own sake, but he was a man who would not allow injustice to continue. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert, the moment felt suspended, poised between danger and hope, fear and the possibility of rescue. The raiders shifted uneasily, their laughter fading into uncertainty. The cowboy's eyes never left them, and his hand rested lightly on the brim of his hat, a subtle gesture of confidence and control. He spoke again, calmly but firmly, "I am giving you one chance. Release her now. There is no reason for this cruelty to continue." Ahioka felt tears prick at her eyes, though she did not let them fall. Her body ached and her strength was nearly gone, but this man's words, his courage, gave her hope. She realized that survival was not just about endurance. It was also about the kindness of others, about courage standing against cruelty. This stranger, this cowboy, had chosen to act when others had done nothing. The raiders exchanged a few tense words, their voices low and uncertain. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only moments, one of them hesitated, then slowly loosened his grip on the ropes. Ahioka stumbled forward slightly, feeling the weight of her captivity begin to lift. The cowboy stepped closer, his presence protective yet calm, ready to ensure her safety. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Ahioka's breathing eased. She was not free yet, but the path to freedom had appeared. The cowboy's courage had created an opening, and she clung to it, allowing herself a small spark of hope. Her mind, though exhausted, began to think clearly again. Perhaps this desert, harsh and unyielding, was not a place only of suffering. Perhaps it could also be a place where courage, kindness, and determination could prevail. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. The desert wind whispered softly, carrying the promise of change, of survival, and of rescue. Ahioka, though still weak, lifted her head, feeling the presence of the man who had intervened. She did not know his name, but she could sense his goodness, his willingness to stand against wrong, and his commitment to seeing her safely through the desert. And as the shadows lengthened and the cool evening began to settle over the sands, the young Apache woman, once dragged mercilessly across the desert, felt the first stirrings of hope, courage, and the possibility of freedom. The desert air grew cooler as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and crimson. Shadows stretched long across the sand, twisting and shifting with the uneven terrain. Ahioka's body ached from hours of being dragged, her muscles stiff and her hands raw. Yet in the midst of exhaustion, she felt a glimmer of hope. The cowboy had arrived, and his presence changed everything. She could not speak, could not move freely, but she watched him with a mixture of fear and trust, sensing that her life might soon turn in a new direction. The raiders, sensing the seriousness in the man's voice, hesitated. They were caught between their usual arrogance and the calm authority of someone who refused to be intimidated. One of them, a tall man with a harsh face, stepped forward, trying to assert dominance. "Who do you think you are, stopping us in the desert?" he sneered. His hand moved toward his belt, where a knife hung, but the cowboy's steady gaze did not waver. "I am a man who does not tolerate cruelty," the cowboy replied evenly. His tone carried quiet strength, a firmness that required no shouting. "This young woman is not yours to take. Let her go now or face the consequences." The desert seemed to hold its breath. Ahioka, watching silently, felt her heart pound. She had never imagined that someone would stand up to the raiders, especially a lone man against a group. Yet here he was, unflinching and fearless. She could feel the tension in the air, the delicate balance between violence and mercy. Each moment stretched like an eternity, every movement and word critical. The raiders exchanged uncertain glances. The tall man with the knife hesitated, as though unsure whether to risk confrontation. The others muttered among themselves, their confidence shaken by the cowboy's calm authority. The young woman, though still bound and weak, sensed that their power was not absolute. Perhaps there was a chance, a slim but real chance for freedom. The cowboy took a careful step forward, keeping his hands visible and unthreatening. "I do not seek a fight," he said. "I seek justice. You have no right to harm her. Release her and you may leave with your pride intact. Refuse and you will answer for your actions." His voice carried over the desert, calm but unyielding. For a moment, silence reigned. The wind rustled through the sparse shrubs and the raiders seemed to weigh their options. Their laughter had faded, replaced by doubt and uncertainty. They had never encountered someone who spoke with such steady conviction, and the desert, harsh and open, made retreat more difficult. The cowboy's presence, his calm and unwavering stance, created a space where fear and courage collided. Finally, one of the raiders spoke, his voice cautious. "And what will you do if we do?" he asked, trying to mask the unease in his tone. He shifted his weight, unsure whether to advance or retreat. The cowboy's gaze did not falter. "Then you will regret it," he said simply. His confidence was not boastful but firm, and the raiders sensed the truth in his words. There was a quiet power in someone who did not threaten rashly but spoke with unwavering resolve. Ahioka felt her chest tighten with hope. She could see the hesitation in the raiders, the uncertainty that had never appeared before. Her body was weary, her hands still bound, but her mind began to clear. She realized that she might actually be free. The desert, which had been a place of pain and struggle, was now the stage for courage and mercy. The tall man finally took a step back, lowering his knife slightly. "Fine," he muttered reluctantly. "Take her and go, she's yours now." His words were gruff, but they carried the weight of surrender. The other raiders murmured among themselves, some looking toward the horizon as if considering escape, while others simply stood in silence. The cowboy moved carefully forward, keeping a protective presence between Ahioka and the raiders. He reached out and began loosening the ropes that bound her wrists. Her hands were raw and swollen, but finally, after what felt like hours, she was free. She collapsed slightly into the cowboy's supportive hold, too exhausted to stand fully on her own. "You're safe now," he said gently, helping her to steady herself. His voice was calm, filled with reassurance, and Ahioka felt tears prick her eyes. She had survived so much already, but this moment, the first true relief, was overwhelming. She had endured the desert, the raiders, and the fear, and now she could feel hope blossoming inside her. The raiders, seeing their authority finally broken, began to retreat. They mounted their horses quickly, casting wary glances toward the cowboy and the young woman. He did not pursue them, knowing that the immediate danger had passed. Instead, he focused on Ahioka, ensuring that she was steady, cared for, and able to walk without falling. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, the cowboy guided her through the desert, moving toward a small canyon that could provide safety for the night. The wind had cooled, and the desert now carried a quiet stillness. Ahioka leaned slightly on the cowboy, drawing strength from his calm presence. She realized that courage was not just about enduring hardship. It was also about the people who choose to stand up for others, even when it is difficult. Along the way, the cowboy asked quietly, "Can you walk?" Ahioka nodded weakly, her legs trembling. He offered his arm, steadying her as they moved slowly through the uneven terrain. Every step was a reminder of how far she had come, how much she had endured, and how close she was now to safety. The desert night grew darker, the stars bright against the deep blue sky. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of desert flowers and dry earth. Ahioka felt the ache in her muscles, the dryness of her lips, and the weariness of her entire body. Yet she also felt the strength of her spirit, which had carried her through every obstacle so far. She realized that survival was not just about the body, but about courage, hope, and the kindness of strangers willing to help. The cowboy did not speak much, but his quiet presence was comforting. He guided her carefully, alert to every sound in the desert, every movement that might signal danger. Ahioka trusted him completely, knowing that his calm strength was as protective as any physical barrier. She focused on walking steadily, conserving her remaining energy, and letting herself feel the first real sense of safety in what had been an endless day of fear and pain. As they moved deeper into the canyon, Ahioka's thoughts returned to her family. She imagined their faces, their worry, and their prayers for her safety. The thought of being reunited with them gave her renewed strength, even as her body ached. She had survived the desert and the raiders, and now, with the cowboys' help, she would reach home. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small, sheltered area where the desert rocks formed a natural protection. The cowboy helped her sit on a smooth stone, offering water from a small flask he carried. Ahioka drank gratefully, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat and giving her a small burst of energy. "You're safe here for now," the cowboy said gently. "We'll make sure you get back to your people." Ahioka nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. She had survived, not just because of her own endurance, but because someone had chosen to act, to stand up against cruelty, and to help her when she had no power to help herself. The night grew quiet around them, the desert's harshness softened by the stillness and the presence of the kind stranger who had intervened. Ahioka rested her head slightly, feeling the tension in her body begin to ease. The pain and fear of the day had not disappeared, but for the first time she felt hope, real hope, that she would survive, that she would return to her family, and that courage and kindness could overcome cruelty. As the stars shone overhead, Ahioka realized that her journey was not over, but the worst of her struggle had passed. The cowboy's bravery had given her a second chance, a moment of relief in a desert that had tested her to the very limit. She knew she would carry this memory forever, a story of endurance, courage, and the unexpected kindness of someone willing to stand for what was right. The desert night was quiet, the sky a vast canvas of twinkling stars stretching endlessly above. The air had cooled after the harsh heat of the day, and a gentle breeze whispered through the rocks and sagebrush. Ahioka rested against a smooth stone, her body exhausted from the long hours of struggle, but her spirit was lighter than it had been in days. The ropes that had bound her were gone, and the oppressive fear that had weighed on her like a heavy cloak had been replaced by a fragile but growing hope. The cowboy, who had intervened so decisively earlier, stayed close, keeping a careful watch over the area. He was quiet, but his presence was steady and reassuring. Ahioka looked at him, noticing the calm determination in his eyes, the way he had acted without hesitation to protect her, and the gentle care with which he guided her through the desert. She had never met anyone like him, someone who could be both firm and kind, strong and patient all at once. "Can you walk a little?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. Ahioka nodded, slowly rising to her feet. Her legs wobbled beneath her, weak from exhaustion and the hours spent being dragged across the desert. The cowboy supported her, letting her lean slightly on his arm as they moved. Each step was careful, deliberate, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was free, and now she could take the steps that would bring her back to safety and to her family. They moved slowly through the canyon, following the contours of the land to avoid the roughest patches of sand and rock. Ahioka's eyes scanned the desert around them, noting the distant ridges and the scattered shrubs, familiar now as places of shelter or guidance. She remembered the lessons her father had taught her, the stories her grandmother had told her about reading the land, about using the desert itself as a guide. Each memory became a small source of strength, helping her navigate despite her weakness. As they walked, Ahioka thought about the raiders, now far behind them. She felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear, but the cowboys' calm presence kept panic from taking hold. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was also about finding someone trustworthy to help, someone who could act decisively when the moment demanded it. The cowboy had done that. He had given her a second chance at life, and she was determined not to waste it. After some time, the canyon opened slightly, revealing a faint trail that led toward a familiar area, an old path used by travelers and traders long ago, now mostly hidden by sand and rocks. The cowboy motioned for her to follow carefully. "This path should take us closer to your village," he said quietly. "We need to move carefully, but you're stronger than you realize." His words, though simple, gave Ahioka courage. She focused on each step, letting the fatigue in her legs mingle with determination in her heart. As they continued, the stars above grew brighter, illuminating the desert in soft silver light. Ahioka's mind drifted to her family. She pictured her mother waiting by the garden, her father standing alert, and her little brother playing nearby, unaware of the dangers that had passed through their home. Her heart ached with longing, but the thought of reuniting with them gave her renewed energy. Each step was now a step closer to safety, a step toward the warmth and love she had missed for so long. The cowboy spoke occasionally, pointing out landmarks, giving gentle advice, or simply offering encouragement. "There's a small stream ahead," he said at one point, "where you can drink more and rest. It's not far." Ahioka's eyes brightened at the mention of water. Even a short respite would help her recover from the exhaustion of the day. She pushed herself forward, leaning on his arm when her legs threatened to give way, grateful for his steady guidance. Finally, after hours of careful travel through the rocky and sandy terrain, they reached a small stream hidden in the desert's folds. The water was clear and cool, a stark contrast to the burning heat and thirst she had endured earlier. Ahioka knelt beside it, cupping her hands to drink, feeling relief wash through her body as the water soothed her parched throat. The cowboy watched quietly, giving her space but remaining vigilant, aware of the dangers that could still exist even in this moment of peace. "Take your time," he said softly. "We'll rest here for a little while before moving on." Ahioka nodded, letting herself sink onto the soft sand near the stream. She felt the tension in her body slowly ease, the ache of exhaustion beginning to fade. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel safe, and to acknowledge the kindness of the stranger who had intervened when no one else could. After a short rest, they resumed their journey, following the stream as it led toward areas that would guide them back to the village. The cowboy remained alert, scanning the horizon and listening to the sounds of the desert, but he also spoke occasionally, telling stories of his own travels, keeping Ahioka's mind engaged and her spirits lifted. His calm voice, steady presence, and small acts of kindness gave her confidence that she would make it back to her people. As dawn approached, the desert began to change. The first light of morning cast a soft glow over the sand and rocks, transforming the landscape into a place of quiet beauty. Ahioka felt a renewed sense of hope. The long night of fear and uncertainty was ending, and she was nearing the place she had longed for, home. The thought of seeing her family again filled her with joy and relief, a feeling so strong it gave her the final burst of strength she needed to continue. Finally, after what seemed like endless hours, they reached the outskirts of the village. Ahioka recognized the familiar rock formations, the small paths between homes, and the faint smoke rising from the chimneys. Her heart leapt with joy, and tears filled her eyes. She could see her mother running toward her, her arms outstretched, and her father following closely, their faces etched with worry and relief. Her little brother, wide-eyed, ran forward, calling her name. Ahioka broke into a trembling smile, letting herself be embraced by her family. The exhaustion of the past day fell away as she felt the warmth, safety, and love of those she had feared she might never see again. She clung to them, feeling the security she had longed for and the relief that the worst was over. The cowboy stepped back respectfully, watching the reunion with quiet satisfaction, knowing that his role in this chapter of her life was complete. Her mother held her tightly, whispering words of love and relief, while her father examined her carefully, making sure she was unharmed. Ahioka told them, slowly and carefully, about the raiders, the desert, and the man who had helped her. Their faces reflected a mixture of sorrow for what she had endured and gratitude for the stranger who had intervened. Ahioka's little brother clung to her, asking questions she could only answer with gentle reassurances and a promise that she was safe now. The cowboy approached them quietly, tipping his hat. "She's safe," he said simply. "That's all that matters." The family thanked him, their voices filled with gratitude, and Ahioka felt a deep sense of appreciation as well. She realized that courage and kindness existed in unexpected places, and that sometimes strangers could become heroes when it mattered most. In the days that followed, Ahioka recovered with the care and support of her family. Her body healed, her spirit grew stronger, and she reflected on the lessons she had learned in the desert. She had discovered the depth of her own courage, the strength of hope, and the importance of those willing to stand against injustice. The memory of the cowboy, his calm courage and decisive action, became a story she would carry with her forever, a story of humanity, bravery, and the power of compassion. Ahioka never forgot the long hours in the desert, the pain and fear she had endured, or the moment when hope arrived in the form of a stranger. But she also never forgot the resilience within herself, the lessons of her family, and the unyielding spirit of her people. Her life, forever marked by this experience, became a testament to endurance, courage, and the quiet miracles that can occur when someone chooses to act with kindness and bravery. The desert, once a place of fear and suffering, had become a place of reflection and strength. Ahioka understood that life would always bring challenges, but she had proven to herself that she could survive, adapt, and overcome. And in that understanding, she found peace, hope, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone, both in the bonds of her family and in the unexpected kindness of those willing to stand for what was right.